Dr. Lowe, you've been a teacher for 8 years now, correct?
Yes, it's what it seemed to be. I just love teaching. It's one of the best things I ever do.
And in those 8 years, Terry Hayes has been your favorite student, hasn't she?
Well, I've had other students that have come to her,
But she's your favorite student, isn't she?
I would say so, yes.
In your direct, you called Terry Hayes brilliant. You've never called any of your other students brilliant, have you?
Well, I have called some of my other students brilliant, but there was never any student that matched Terry's caliber. There were some that came close.
But Terry Hayes is the only one that's actually been brilliant, hasn't she?
Well, brilliance is a broad term. Brilliance could either be solving an idea to create a new invention or having an IQ of 170.
Let's move on. So, you liked Terry so much, you offered her the job as lab assistant, didn't you?
Yes, I believed I could trust her. She was a very trustworthy person, very humble, and she needed money.
Let's move on. In your direct, you said you trusted her with this job as lab assistant. That means you gave her full access to everything in your chemistry lab, didn't you?
Well, I wouldn't say the two go hand in hand, but yes, because of my trust, I did trust her with having full access to the lab.
You also trusted her enough to leave her unsupervised in the lab, didn't you?
Yes, she would always organize the chemicals for me. Like, there were many times I had to leave the lab for a few minutes to go get snacks for the two of us or something. Terry was always hungry after school, so she needed food.
Miss Dr. Lowe, you were only in there about half the time she was in there, weren't you?
Well, yes, but only for minutes at a time. I mean, she would only be there for about an hour.
But you were only in there for half the time, weren't you?
Yes, like about half an hour out of an hour.
So you could admit that it is possible that Terry could have taken the arsenic trioxide from your lab without your knowledge.
Well, I mean, it's possible, but I mean, she never really took anything. Once I asked
But
her...
it's possible, isn't it?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor. Badgering the witness.
Your Honor, I'm just trying to prevent him from giving us narrative answers that would take up the time of the court.
I will I'll overrule the objection, but I will say let the witness finish their answers and, there are other ways to other things.
Thank you. So back to my question. It is possible that Terry Hayes could have taken the arsenic trioxide without your knowledge.
Yes, but by her ethics, she never would. Once I asked her to get papers from my co-teacher's office, and she said she had to ask him first just to make sure she wasn't stealing.
Let's move on to your bad memory. You mentioned earlier that you have memory problems, didn't you?
It's not just like memory problems. Like I said before, I'm bridging on 50. I mean, your mind isn't the same as when you're 25.
But, so because you have the bad memory, you cannot testify today that you did any experiments with arsenic trioxide.
Well, like I said before, I mean, my mind isn't the same as when I was 25. I still remember the things I need to, but that's not a
But
very...
you cannot testify, but you cannot say for a fact that you did any experiments with arsenic trioxide.
Not for a fact, no.
Thank you. Now, do you keep any records of experiments or supplies?
Yes, I usually do keep records, always, of every single thing I do. Well, not every single thing I do, but like when I replenish chemicals or use them in experiments, I usually keep a record.
Permission for a moment with co-counsel? Permission to use permission to approach please. Let the record reflect I'm showing opposing counsel the affidavit.
The record will so reflect.
Permission to approach the witness. Now, I'm showing you a copy of your affidavit. Dr. Lowe, can you please read silently while I read aloud? Lines 84 through 86. I tend to be forgetful, especially about those kinds of details, and I'm not very good at paperwork. I don't keep an ongoing inventory list of the chemicals in my lab. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Permission to retrieve the affidavit? So, Dr. Lowe, you just said you kept records, but in your affidavit, you said you don't keep records.
Well, like I said before, it's not an ongoing record, but I mean, every time we have a big experiment, I will always write down what I need to do, but sometimes I forget where I misplace them.
But you said you don't keep records in your
I
affidavit.
said I don't keep ongoing records, but I do keep records sometimes. When we have a big experiment that uses a lot of chemicals.
Do you keep records of when you replenish and replace chemicals?
Yes, at the end of every year, I usually replenish and replace chemicals, so I keep a record of that as well.
Moment to confer with co-counsel. I'd like to move on. I'd like to move on to your experiments during your school year. Dr. Lowe, you, in your affidavit, or in your direct, rather, you said you could not recall any experiments that you did with arsenic trioxide that year.
No, I cannot recall. Like I said before, my memory is getting a lot bit bad, so I don't recall the exact chemicals I used in all my experiments.
You also can't recall that. You also can't recall that because you don't keep records of your experiments, do you?
Yes, I don't keep ongoing records. Only if there's a big experiment that uses a bunch of my chemicals that I need to know about. If there's only if I only use to say only arsenic or another chemical in my experiments, I won't keep a record of it.
You don't keep a record of your experiments.
Only if they're very small, no. Only if they're gigantic experiments. That use a lot of chemicals.
So there were no huge experiments during the 2009 to 2010 school year.
I believe there was one, but it did not use arsenic.
Thank you. Now, since you don't keep records, you can't say for a fact that you replenished arsenic trioxide at the end of the 2009 to 2010 school year.
No. For some strange reason, I lost the paperwork from that year, the end of the year record that I keep.
Permission for a moment to confer with co-counsel. Dr. Lowe, you said you lost the records, but in your statement, you said you don't keep any records.
Well, in my statement, I said at the end of the year, I replenish chemicals and keep a record when I replenish chemicals in the bottle. But I forgot the records from that one year, so I'm not sure if I replenished it or not at the end of the year.
Let the record reflect that I'm approaching opposing counsel with a copy of the affidavit. So, at the end, please read from midway through line 85 through line 86. I don't keep an ongoing inventory list of the chemicals in my lab. Generally, I wait till the end of the year and replenish anything that has been used during the school year. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
So, Dr. Lowe, you have no record that you replenished any chemicals during the school year.
Well, no. Later in my statement, I do say that I order chemicals from a company, and the company still send me a list of what I did order.
But you don't keep records of your arsenic trioxide, of the arsenic trioxide being replenished, did you?
Well, the order is what I consider records to be with the chemicals that I
But
replaced.
you never kept a record, did you?
Well, the record is the order.
No further questions.